So mal b'val ta'acher. Ki tidor neder amar rachmana. If you make a vow, v'halo nadar, you did not make a vow. Although, as I pointed out, there is bal ta'acher without having made a vow. But nevertheless, this didn't start with you. Odioma ubasar shama ve'esem shama. You should bring there. You should come there and bring there to Yerushalayim, to the Beis Hamikdash, your korbanot, v'amachayim, and you're obligated. Now that's not a pasuk in Baal Ta'acher. That's a general pasuk about bringing your korbanot to the Beis Hamikdash. But maybe they're linked, and maybe if you have any obligation to bring a korban, even if it got you through inheriting this animal, it would also link you to Baal Ta'acher. So the Gemara says, Tarshma, come in here. V'tani Rabbi Chia, me'imach. God will seek it out from you. You, not the heir. If it's an heir who did not make the vow, who did not have the direct obligation to bring it, then the heir is exempt from Baal Ta'acher. So the Gemara says, "V'hai me'imach mibayale." Don't you need it to tell you zelecha chichopeah, which was, as we pointed out multiple times, the most bizarre inclusion in the Baal Ta'acher category. But anyway, we learn it out from there because those are psukim where the Torah says the poor person imach with you. So the Gemara says, "Kari be'imach v'kari be'me'imach." No, it has, since it says me'imach. The imach tells you lechet chichapeah, and the me'imach tells you only you, not your heir. It's funny the phrase karibeh, because normally the Gemara just says no, there's an extra man. Karibeh often suggests a different way of reading the verse. But anyway, the Gemara is saying you learn both out. So interestingly, although as we said, Baal Ta'acher does not require you to make the vow, like if you're obligated in a chatas or an asham, it does have to start with you. So even though you're obligated to bring this korban because you inherited it, and there might still be the mitzvah aseh of ubasa shama v'vesim shama, there is not Baal Ta'acher. Okay, by Rabbi Zer. Now Rabbi Zer had another question. Isha mahi b'Baal Ta'acher. Is a woman transgress Baal Ta'acher? Now that's bizarre. Why not? She took a vow. She's obligated. Why shouldn't she? So mi amrinan halo mechayve b're'iyah. Now this is quite fascinating because again, since the Gemara, the Torah doesn't connect it to the regalim, but all we've been learning in the Gemara is a connection to the regalim, and so maybe a woman doesn't have to be ol regel. A woman could stay at home while her husband is ol regel. So therefore, the significance of having had that opportunity to bring it during the regalim, and the regalim being a significant time, you had a chance, you didn't bring it, it's Baal Ta'acher, that doesn't apply to a woman. So maybe since she could stay at home the whole time and never be in Yerushalayim, so she never squandered an opportunity. So maybe there's never a sense of ichur. Right now, obviously, the Gemara before spoke a whole idea of a year. So according to the idea before that there's just a ichur because of time on the calendar, you're a year late, then that would. But if you emphasize ichur, delay, in the context of regalim and squandered opportunities, so maybe it would not apply to a woman. So therefore, maybe she does not have Baal Ta'acher. Or perhaps we say ha'isa b'simcha. She's included in the mitzvah of simcha, and therefore she has to be in Yerushalayim in order to experience simcha, and therefore she is in Yerushalayim. Okay, so what do we say? So the Gemara says like this. Now, Amalei by the way, even though she's chayv and simcha, doesn't mean she actually goes into the Beis Hamikdash, but nevertheless, being ola l'regel to have that simcha together in Yerushalayim might be enough. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye said back to Rabbi Seila, v'teipuk le da'isa b'simcha. So it says, yeah, okay, that's a good enough reason. She's part of Simcha. What's your question? He has to be in Yerushalayim. Now again, even with that, you could have said she doesn't have to be in the Beis Hamikdash. Anyway, but let's take a look. But for Rabbi, that was enough. So the Gemara says, "Umi amar Rabbi hachi." Rabbi really say that that's obviously enough. Rabbi isha ba'ala misamcha. A woman, her husband, gives her joy, which means that. What does that mean? So Rashi says it means that she doesn't have to eat korbanot. That the idea of simcha, which is shlamei simcha, is not applied to a woman. It's another form of simcha, nice clothing and so on, and therefore she doesn't have to be anywhere even near Yerushalayim. The husband, it could be like what they do now when they go to Uman, where there's these interesting stories, like these husbands are abandoning their wives, like some of them, their wives, not all of them. I can't speak for the women, but some of their wives say, "Love it, get rid of the husband, we'll have this time to themselves." All the women get together. So he leaves, gives her some nice clothes. Maybe everybody's happy. Okay, separate vacations. So that's what Rashi says. She doesn't have to be in Yerushalayim. Tosha says, no, she would have to be in Yerushalayim to eat the Shlomei Simcha. But the point is, she wouldn't have to bring the Shlomei Simcha. Right? Let's see the Tosos. 3 lines from the bottom. right? So yes, the husband, maybe she partakes in the Shlamei Simcha, but she's not the one that has to come to the Beis Hamikdash. The husband brings the korbanot and has her eat from the korbanot. Okay, so therefore, there is that might be enough to say that she's not. It's not an idea of Baal Ta'acher. Okay, so let's take a look.
What about the unmarried girls? I mean, it doesn't answer that.
Then certainly they're not obligated. It's fundamentally an obligation on the men. But even when they're included in Simcha, because they're still not the ones going to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so the Gemara says if they're not the ones going to the Beis Hamikdash, according to Rashi, it's not even related to the korbanot. Why is this relevant? The Dvar Reb Zera come out. No. According to Rabbi Zera, I hold they're not even going into the Beis Hamikdash. They're not even eating korbanos. But you, Rabbi Zera, that you mentioned the idea of Isa b'simcha, presumably you hold they are eating from the basar of korbanot, or maybe you even hold that they would go into the Beis, that they would bring shlamei simcha. But that we've never heard. Anyway, shouldn't that be enough? So again, this is quite fascinating because it gets to the issue. Is Baal Ta'acher just ichur, like we just say? It's like past a year, which is what we had before calendar time, or the specific link to the regalim. And if it's linked to the regalim, then maybe it's not enough that it's a regal. Maybe it's a regal in which you had an obligation to be in the Beis Hamikdash, or maybe obligation to be in Yerushalayim. That might be the difference here with the case of the woman, to be in Yerushalayim to eat the korbanot, but not to be in the Beis Hamikdash. And that defines the sense of a squandered opportunity, and that defines Baal Ta'acher. Yes, Michael?
One of the things I wanted to ask before was, one of the things that they said was on Baal Ta'acher was tzedakot. I mean, does that mean, like, let's say I get an aliyah and and I say, but before she's nadei chai dollar Beit HaKnesset.
Well, first of all, we already talked. So the Beit HaKnesset might not be the tzedakah. Under what category does Beit HaKnesset fall? Does it fall under any category? Does it fall under a type of a stam neder, like, or a type of a bedek habayis? So it's not exactly clear where it falls under. But tzedakot, the Gemara particularly emphasizes aniyim and gives it a different time frame because of hakaimei aniyim. So but yes, I mean that's why people are often very makbid to say beli neder and so on, not just so that if they don't do it, they don't violate their neder, but also so there would not be Baal Ta'acher. But yes, it is a very fascinating discussion about, real issues about at what stage is the real Baal Ta'acher, by when you pledge to give money at a certain time. Okay, but I'm not going to give you a full halachic answer. Okay, so Ibailu, that'll be a separate year, which I won't give. We'll talk about it some other time. No, seriously, let's go on. Ibailu, they asked the question. Bechor me'emasai monim lo shana. Now, this is not Baal Ta'acher, because this is, but once you're talking about a time frame, the Torah says that you're supposed to eat a bechor shana b'shana every year. So when does you start counting the year for a bechor?
What do you think was when it's
Abai Amar Mishash and Olad, the day it's born. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar Mishash El Lahar the time it's fit to be brought as a korban, 8 days old. He said the Gemara, it's not a debate. Habitam habibal mum. If it's born without a blemish, then it's fit to be a korban. Then you don't start until day 8. If it's born with a blemish, then it's not going to be brought as a korban, and therefore you start immediately. Okay, the idea, because what do you do as a bechor with a blemish? You don't even redeem it, as we said. You can't redeem it because you didn't instill it with kedusha. It naturally has kedusha, and the kohen eats it with a blemish outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, the idea of a year there would start from the day it was born. So the Gemara says.
I'm sorry, I think you switched there in the middle. So which one is it? If it's a psalm, then you get from when it was born, or from when it's 7.
From after it's 8 days old, because you only start counting the year from the time it's fit to be brought, which is after it's 8 days old. So the Gemara says. But a balmum, you start counting immediately because it would be fit to be shechted and eaten immediately. So the year would start immediately from the day it's born. So the Gemara says, balmum yimatzi achilei. Since when can you eat a balmum? The day it's born, because Rashi is sort of saying if it's born, maybe it's a nefel, maybe it's like a not going to survive, and therefore it can't be eaten, especially if it has a mum. So no, sometimes an animal could be born and it's clear that it has a full 9 months of gestation, and it's clear that it's fully born of healthy, and it's not a concern of it being a nefel. And there are cases where you could eat an animal the day it's born, and therefore you would start counting the year from the day it's born. What problem do you have there, Charlie?
I mean, that's saying that a decree from the Torah is conditional.
What do you mean? What are you talking about?
I mean, I just find that surprising.
What decree is conditional? What are you talking about?
So if you think you can figure out that it was full, the truth is you rarely know ever how long the gestation was.
Yeah. What decree is conditional? There's just a halacha of whether you're concerned that it might be a nefel or not.
How can you be sure?
Whatever. Halacha has different ways of defining. I don't understand what's bothering you. Tanu Rabbanan. A rabbi
What are you
taught.
counting a
I'm
year
serious. We make assessments all the
for? What are
time
you
in
counting a
halacha.
year for?
Because it says shana
But what are
b'shana.
you doing? What are you waiting
You're
for?
either eating for I don't know. You don't want to shecht it the first day. You're
You have to wait a
procrastinating.
year to eat it?
No, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. You have to eat it, or not. You have to. I mean, the evid you can do it afterwards, but you're supposed to eat a bechor within the year. Okay, I'm sorry if that was not clear. Shana b'shana. Lifnei Hashem Elokecha tochlenu shana b'shana. So you're supposed to eat the bechor within its first year. So the question is, how is that first year
So
defined?
even if it's about movie, you're supposed to eat it within the first year.
Yeah, either eat it or bring it as a korban within the first year. Now, are you over in Baal Ta'acher if you have the year without having the 3 regalim? I don't know exactly. Okay, but this is at least the idea of shana b'shana. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught. Be'echad b'Nisan Rosh Hashanah lichadashim. So now we're done sort of with some of the Baal Ta'acher, okay, and now we're going to look at the rest of the day at a different brightot that have other things that are on the list of Rosh Hashanah that we did not have in our Mishnah. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, Be'echad b'Nisan, on the first of Nisan, Rosh Hashanah lichadashim. It's Rosh Hashanah for the months, meaning Nisan starts is month 1, B'chodesh HaRishon, B'chodesh HaSheni, etc. I mean, that's the most explicit in the Torah, right? Iburin, for making a leap year. We'll see what that means. Sounds like you decide on Rosh Hashanah, on Nisan, whether to make a leap year, which is already 12 months in advance. U'trumot shkalim, which is clear. We learned shkalim means that the bringing the korbanot from the new shekel starts on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. We know that's why in the beginning of Adar you go and you send the shluchim out and you start collecting the shkalim, because you bring the korbanot from the new donations. Because the whole point of korbanot tzibur is that they come from communal funds and you recollect it every year and you start bringing from the new funds on Nisan. And some say even for renting houses, that if you say to somebody, I'm renting you this house or this apartment, if you say for a year, then it's 12 months. But if you say until the end of the year, so the end of the year, that means when? And this is saying, well, when comes until the last day in Adar, and the first day of Nisan is already a new year. So that's quite fascinating. I mean, again, supposedly if you're using the years of kings for your shtarot and your secular financial documents, and those get incremented on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, then it's not crazy to say that when you do other financial transactions and you refer to the year, that you refer to a year which starts again and gets incremented on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Is that clear? The logical connection of those two? Again, if in your locale they use the secular dates and the secular kings, and they do it by Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, the counting of the years, this would be quite strange. Okay, so let's take a look now as we unpack all of this.
So then is the rent adjusted the same way that when you purchase a land, it depends on how many...
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. If somebody basically says, if the document says like till the end of the year and the money is like clearly 6 months of rent based on whatever the going rate is, but Rosh Chodesh Nisan is a month away, what do? Do you say, well, clearly it meant Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, it didn't mean Rosh Chodesh Nisan, or do you say, no, maybe it was, maybe he just paid a lot for the apartment, so that becomes an interesting question. We'll discuss it in a little bit when we get to it in the Gemara. So let's take a look. So, okay, l'chadashim minalan. How do you know? So we're a little behind now, but you're going to see this stuff is going to go super fast. How do you know that that Nisan is Rosh Chodesh? It starts the counting of the months. That it's the first month is Nisan and the second is Iyar and so on. The verse says, "Chodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodashim. Yishonu lachem l'chodshei Hashanah. Dibru kol hadas b'Yisrael le'mor be'asor lachodesh hazeh v'yichulam ish sel beis avos sel habayis." So that's where the Torah says that the first month, this month that Pesach comes, is the first month, and that's how it gets started counting as one, and that's why the other months in the Torah is Chodesh HaSheni and Chodesh HaShlishi, etc. And it's the month that Pesach was brought. Now, I don't know. So, because it helps to out to that. Basically, to prove the reason to quote the whole pasuk, could have said V'gomer, but was to get to the last point that the month, which is Rosh Chodashim, is the month that the Korban Pesach was brought. Okay, so and that's going to be important because how do we know which month Pesach was brought? Right? I mean, it's a little circular. Oh, it was obviously brought in Nisan because it says the first month. Which month was that? How do we know which month Pesach was brought? We know that the month it was brought was called month number 1. So here's how we know which month it was brought. The Ksiv, another verse says, Shamor's Chodesh Aviv v'asisa Pesach l'Hashem Elokecha. So we know that the Pesach is brought in the month of the spring. And Aviv is understood to be the month in which the wheat ripens, okay, or the barley, the ripening of the grain. And that clearly is Nisan. Ezu chodesh yesh bo aviv, which is the month that has this ripening of the grain. Hevi omer ze Nisan, it's Nisan. V'kari le'rishon. So we see Aviv was the Korban Pesach, and that we know is Nisan, and therefore we know that Rosh Chodesh, that the first month is Nisan. So the Gemara says, ve'ema iyar. What do you mean about iyar? How about iyar? Maybe, there's still some ripening going on. No, but Aviv Eleka. There's no real ripening of the grain still happening in iyar. Ve'ema adar. Well, how about adar? Some grain ripens early. No, but rov Aviv Eleka. You need it to be the primary month of the ripening.
Why?
So the says, midi rov Aviv Ksiv. I don't know, it doesn't say the primary month of the ripening. Maybe Adar is already considered to be Aviv. Maybe Pesach happened in Adar. Ella Amar Rav Chisda Mehacha. Fine, this first. So we'll try to do another thing which we can infer it based on the agricultural period. In the 7th month, on the 15th day, Sukkot, Bas Bechem is Tuas Haaretz. When you gather in the grain, it's been drying out in the field. What's the month that you gather in the grain? It's Tishrei. The Kakari Shvi. It's called the 7th month. So therefore you see that clearly Nisan is the first. How do you know? Maybe it's Cheshvan. Maybe Iyar is number 1, and therefore, Sukkot falls out on Cheshvan. No, but Asif Leka. There's no real gathering of the grain still happening in Cheshvan. Veima Elul. How about Elul? And that's 7th Adar, because since we already said that some of the grain begins to ripen in Adar, that could mean that some of the gathering in begins to happen in what do you call it? In Elul. Okay, so maybe Elul is the beginning of the gathering in, the same way Adar was the beginning of the ripening. No, but rov Asif Leka. You need the month that is predominantly about gathering in. So I'm going to ask the same question. Midi rov Asif Ksiv. It doesn't say predominantly about gathering in. So just because they're linked to agricultural periods does not exactly fix it on Nisan or on Tishrei. There could still be, maybe the early stuff could be a month earlier. Elama Ravina says, fine. We cannot really prove it from the Torah, because obviously there needs to be a fixed point of reference, which is not exactly you're able to find in the Torah. But we could learn it from the words of Kabbalah, meaning from the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim. And now what we're going to do is we're going to quote Psukim. If you take a look at this down the side, basically from Zechariah and Esther, which both share the quality of being post the first Chorban Abayis and coming back from the exile, and therefore importing the names of the Babylonian months. And these psukim are going to identify the numbered month with the named month, because this is when the named months begins, is when they have had the experience of Bavel, and they have adopted the use of those names. So let's take a look. On the 21st day of the 11th month, which is Shavat. Shavat is 11, then Nisan is 1. Rabbi Ulam Mehacha, Vatilakach Esir Lamelech Hashverosh Beis Malchusa B'Chodesh Hasiri Hu Chodesh Tevet. So 10 is Tevet, so 1 is Nisan. Rav Kana Mar Mehacha, Be'arbasa Lo Chodesh HaShi'i B'Kislev. Fine. Rav Acha Mar Yaakov Mar Mehacha, Vayikaru Sofrei HaMelech Beis Hayi B'Chodesh HaShlishi Hu Chodesh Sivan. All right, so 3 is Sivan. Rav Ashi Mar Mehacha, He B'Por Agaral Lifnei Hamam Yom Chodesh Chodesh Shnei Masar Hu Chodesh Adar. So Adar is 12, so Nisan is 1. V'Yibai Seim Mehacha. Chodesh Hamishon, Hu Chodesh Nisan. So that was nice. So the Gemara says,
can't beat that.
My time alone. Why did everybody else not quote this pasuk? No, Dilma my Rishon Lemil say. So no, maybe it said Chodesh Rishon means the first month that this whole story began to happen. So that wasn't explicit that it means the first month in the numbering of the months. So we wanted the other psukim. Yeah, that we wouldn't have said. I don't know. Okay, so Gemara says V'Tana Didan. Now, why did our Tana not say that Nisan was the beginning of the numbering of the months? So it says B'Shonim Kamairi, B'Chadashim Lo Kamairi. It's not dealing with months. It's dealing with the entire year. So this issue of months numbering is not its interest. You could also say, by the way, that months numbering was no longer relevant. Once you started using named months, right, it stopped being, it's a relevant thing, lahalacha, this issue of the numbers. By the way, Tosfos makes 2 points very quickly. Tosfos midivei Kabbalah lo lamadznu. Tosfos says, L'matzi l'melech mikan minayu klal im lo nomer shaisa Kabbalah biyadam seder shmos hachadashim zechar zeh. Tosfos says, look, there's not really a fixed point here either. Just because you say month 1 is Nisan, it begs the question, which is, and when is Nisan? Okay? Right? So what? So who says Nisan is what we identify. So obviously you have to have some fixed point. So if we already know what the order of the months are, right, and which is first and which comes next and so on, then you're able to, once you link them the numbers, to know what we're talking about. Okay, and by the way, and I just want to read the next line. So the Yerushalmi says very clearly they adopted the names of the months from Bavel. Barishona, originally in the Nevi'im, like if you look in Malachim and so on, it says B'yerech Eitanim. It calls the month of Eitanim. What does that mean? Shabo Nodu Avot. The strong ones. That's when the forefathers were born. We'll see this later in the Gemara. B'yerech Bul, or another month is called the month of Bul. This is in Tanakh earlier. Shabo Kol Olam Novel. That's when there's like the the fall. The leaves are falling down. V'artzasuya Bulot Bulot. Shabo Bulim Labeima Bevatem. B'yerech Ziv. Shabo Ziva Ha'ilanot. That's when the trees are blossoming. So what he says is there actually was an interesting transition. In the early period of the time they were in Eretz Yisrael, the months were also associated with maybe more descriptive names that described agricultural events, and maybe those were beginning to become names of months. But then, at the next stage, there were like three stages. First numbers, then descriptive names of agricultural things, and then the names that were adopted from Bavel. Of course, the names that were adopted from Bavel, some of them relate to Babylonian gods, which raises very interesting questions. Okay, back to the Gemara.
There are 2 points.
I don't know. That was the 2 points.
Oh, okay.
One was that you needed already to know the order of the months, and the other was that the months were adopted from Bavel.
That's fascinating. I never ever thought of that question, like until now. Like,
Right.
how do we know that Nisan is
Right.
or, you know what I mean?
Right. And
It's always looking for
some
anything.
fixed point of reference. Exactly. I'm totally ruining my phone here. Okay, so now, wow, I really just did a nice job just now. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. So the Gemara says, U'iburim. Liburim says the Gemara, Minisan Maninan. We count it from Nisan. So, I'm sorry, I misread that. Liburim, Minisan Maninan. Do we really count Liburim from Nisan? Vatani, we taught in the Brisa, Ein Ma'avin Hashanah, Lifnei Rosh Hashanah, V'im Ivrua, Eina Me'uberet. That you do not, because the Gemara assumes it means that you would assess whether to make a leap year on Nisan, which is really a whole 12 months in advance. But the Brisa says, you don't do it too early. You don't do it before Rosh Hashanah, before Tishrei, and if you did it, it doesn't even work. If there's a concern of pressure, which basically means, like Rashi says, you're afraid, for example, that there might be an edict from the Roman government that won't let you do Iber Shana later on, or you might not have, the Nasi might not be available, and you need the Nasi to be involved, then Ma'abrinot or Achar Rosh Hashanah miyad. You can do it immediately after Rosh Hashanah. And anyway, whenever you do it, the only month that you can add is an extra month of Adar. Okay, that's because it says, that's because we learned that from Aviv, and therefore, since the point of the Ibur is to make sure Pesach falls out in the spring, then the adjustment occurs right before Pesach and occurs in Adar. Anyway, you see here that it can only be done from Tishrei, and we say that it can be done all the way from Nisan. Okay, one of the reasons that you don't want to do it too early in advance is that the word people will forget, right? You want to sort of have it that it's within the context that people remember, okay, we're making an Ibur year, and they know that it's what's going to happen. You don't want to do it too much in advance. Also, the reasons for doing it might change if you do it too much in advance. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my Iburin, Hafsakat Iburim. No, when it means it's the Rosh Hashanah for Iburim, it means that when Nisan comes about, you can no longer make it a leap year. Since you can only make a leap year in Adar, the last opportunity to make a leap year is the last day of Adar. Then you could say, now we're going to have an Adar Sheni. But once it's the first day of Nisan, it's too late to make a leap year. The Tanan, we taught in the Mishnah, Hein Heidu, they, which is the same people we had before, which is Rav Papias and Rabbi Yehoshua, they testified, this is again going to Edios, Shema Abin Hashanah Kol Adar, that you can do a leap year the entire Adar. You can wait till the very last day of Adar before adding a second Adar. Shahayu Omrim, they used to say Ad HaPurim. You cannot do it after Purim, right? You can't do it at the very, very last minute. And now we see you can do it all of Adar. My time in the Mandamar to Purim. What was that logic? Because since we teach that you start talking about Pesach 30 days before, so what's going to happen after Purim? You're going to start teaching Hilchos Pesach. And that meaning you're sending a message to everybody that it's going to be Pesach in 30 days. And then you decide to make a leap year. And then it's not going to be Pesach for another 60 days. Okay? So, Asi Lizuzue Bechametz. They'll come to treat lightly the prohibition of Chametz. Now, when they will treat it lightly, I assumed what it meant was that this year they'll get the message that it's a leap year, But then they'll also have internalized a different message. They'll internalize the message that even when we start learning about Hilchos HaPesach, it might not necessarily wind up to be Pesach 30 days from now, and maybe next year, they won't treat the actual Pesach as the real Pesach. It's like the problem I have when you do too many fire drills, but then you say, don't worry, you don't have to get up. It's just a drill.
Yeah.
So then you teach everybody to ignore it. So, okay, you're teaching me to ignore the learning, because this year we did the learning and it was another 6, and it wasn't Pesach right around. Rashi says, no. Rashi says the problem is this year you'll be Lizuzule. You won't believe it when you heard it's a leap year. Nah, it's not a leap year. We've been learning Hilchos Pesach over the last 2 weeks. And therefore you'll make Pesach in Adar Sheni, and when it really comes Nisan, you won't believe that it's Pesach. Okay, anyway, you don't want to confuse people at the last minute, so you can only do it before Purim. The other one says, no, maybe people know that an Ibra year depends on calculations, and it's always like being figured out and determined. People understand, the rabbis didn't exactly, figure out the calculations and exactly make the determination until now, and they'll accept the reality that yes, you do have an Ibra year, and it won't, lead to them dismissing it. Okay, the Tana Didan. Now we know why we said that it's Rosh Hashanah for Ibarim, which means that this ends your opportunity for making an Ibra year. It starts a new year, and if the previous year is going to be a leap year, it has to occur before Nisan. Okay, the Tana Didan and our Tana about Chalak, he's interested in ways in which the year starts at Nisan, not the way in which the previous year ends. Because again, the Ibra year doesn't start in Nisan because you can't make it a leap year from Nisan. You have to wait till Tishrei. Nisan only ends the previous year as its potential to being a leap year. Okay, so that's the idea of an Ibra year. Yes.
Somewhere, I don't remember where it was, there's a passage that indicates that Hiskiyahu retroactively declared Nisan to be Adar.
Yeah. So there's a Gemara about that. That's one of the things he did, that Lo Hodu Lo Chachamim.
Right.
Okay. All right. So Chumas Shkalim, collecting new funds. I mean, the collection happened earlier, but drawing on the new funds for bringing the korbanot tzibor, the communal sacrifices. Minolan, where's this from? I'm Rabbi Yoshaya. I'm crosses. Rabbi Yoshaya says the verse. Zosulas Chodesh Bechadshel L'Chadshei Hashanah. This is the Ola of the month in its right month for the months of the year. So Amatar, there's a lot of Chodesh going on there. Mm-hmm. So Amatar Chadesh Vavei Korban Mituma Chadasha. Part of what it's saying is B'Chadshei Hashanah, you should renew it, and these communal sacrifices have to come from new funds each year. Meaning it's taken for granted that communal sacrifices come from communal funds. That's what makes them communal. But the Chadshei Hashanah says it has to be renewed each year. Okay, the Gemiri Shana Nisan. How do you know it's Nisan? Because here it says L'Chadshei Hashanah, and by Nisan it's Dichsiv Rishon Hu Lachem L'Chadshei Hashanah, like we quoted before. So the same way that's Nisan, this idea of renewing is at Nisan. So the Gemara says V'limur Shana Mitishrei. I don't get it. Maybe it should be Tishrei. Dichsiv Mereshit Hashanah. God looks at the world, judges the world from the beginning of the year, and we know, we'll discuss later, that that's Rosh Hashanah. That's Tishrei. So no, Gemara says no. No. By the idea of the new korbanot, it said Chadshei Hashanah. It has months of the year. And by Nisan, it says Rishon Hu Lachem L'Chadshei Hashanah, months of the year. So those are very linked phrases. They both have year and months. You don't apply a verse where it says year with months, that this is a new korban l'chadshei Hashanah, from a verse that has the word year without months, by Rosh Hashanah, Mereshit Hashanah. So basically, the pasuk of Nisan, Chadshei Hashanah, and the pasuk of new korbanos, Chadshei Hashanah, link and tell you that it begins anew at Nisan. Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel, says Rabbi in the name of Shmuel, Korbanot Tzibor Habayim Be'echad Nisan Mitzvah Lahavim Min HaChadash. The new communal sacrifices that come on the 1st of Nisan, right, which we've been talking about, you have a mitzvah to bring it from the new funds. But still, if you bring it from old funds, it's still a communal sacrifice, and therefore it's still a good korban. You lost the mitzvah of the idea of a new year, new funds. We taught similarly. There's a mitzvah to bring them, starting on Rosh Chodesh Nisan from the new funds. If you brought from the old funds, you fulfilled the obligation, but you lost a mitzvah. The Yachid, now another halacha, since we're talking about it being communal, if an individual, a private person, contributed, gave his own animal, here, use this as a communal sacrifice, then ksherim, that you can use that as communal, even though it's coming from an individual. But he has to truly give it over to the community, right? So you can say, you see that korban tamid being brought today? That's mine. That's my animal, right? So if you're still saying that, then it's not a real korban tzibur. So yes, we can take your donations, but you have to completely sever your relationship with it. It's no longer treat it, look, yours. No, it's now the tzibur's. Okay, pshita, obviously, if he's totally giving it over, why should there be a problem? No, even though it seems like he is, maybe we should be concerned he's not really. And he'll still wind up talking about how it was his animal that was brought as a korban tzibur. So Kamash Malan, we're not concerned that if it looks like he really is, and he says he really is, we take him at his word. The Tanadina, now why does the author of our Mishnah not mention Nisan as being the first months for for the new shkalim? So kivan the ktanim hevi yatsa lo psikale. Since b'diavad, you can, if your yotze, when you bring from the old, it's not as weighty. It's not absolute. It's supposed to be the new funds here, but not in an absolute sense, because b'diavad you could still bring from the old funds. Okay. The last thing mentioned in this brayta is for renting. If you have a contract and it says until the new year or until the end of the year, it's determined by Nisan, which again works if in general your shtarot are dated based on Nisan. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis taught if you rent something for a year, for the duration of a year, then you go back to the same date, the same calendar date. So by the way, it's not always 12 months. If it's a leap year, it would be 13. The point is you go back to the same calendar date, from Adar 3 until Adar 2 of the next year. The im amar l'shana zo, and if you say I'm renting it to you for this year until the end of this year, so afilu amar el bechad b'adar, even if you only rented it on the first of Adar, kivin shegi yom echad b'Nisan al salo shana. Once the first of Nisan came about, that's it. That's the end of the year, because the year is defined as Nisan. So you say till the end of the year. Yeah, so that would be, like we would say if it was in, a secular context, if you said the end of the year would be understood. It stops on December 31st, however many days it was between now and then. Here too, it stops on the last day of Adar. Okay, and that's what the point of Nisan being Rosh Chodesh means. Rosh Hashanah for that means. Now the Gemara says like this: even though in other contexts, like when we count the years of kings and other contexts, we say one day can already count of the end of the year can already count as a year. So why does it have to be that you rented it on the 1st of Adar? Maybe you rented it on the 28th of Adar, right? And maybe you said the end of the year and you get it for 2 days. Why would we say you minimum only if it was a month? Mar says no. Shani hacha de lotarach inish lemiger beisa lebatzmi tlasin yomi. People don't rent houses for less than 30 days. They don't go to the effort of drawing up a contract and renting a house, right? Minimum a month, right? Who takes out a lease for less than a month? Okay? So therefore, if it was less than a month, if it was the 28th of Adar, then we would actually probably say it meant till the end of next year, right? Whereas if it says, if it's the 1st of Adar, we say it's for 1 month. So the Gemara says, Ve'ema tishrei. So where do you get Nisan? Right? This is not based on pasuk. This is just based on convention. So maybe it means Tishrei. So the Gemara says no. Stam ki agar inish beisa l'kulu yimas kishamim agar. When people rent a house, they want to rent it for the rainy season, right? This certainly reflects, the reality and the more susceptibility to the weather. So therefore, the rainy season begins when you start saying Tein Tolamato Livracha or Mashav Baruch Mar Geshem, right after Tishrei, right, or whatever after Sukkot. So therefore, if you're renting it, nobody wants it to stop right before Tishrei. That's the time that you want to make sure that you've got your house. So it would not make sense for that to be defined as the year, okay, right? Because you understand, right? Because if you rented it right before Tishrei, it would be crazy that Tishrei would be when you have to get evicted. Nobody wants to get evicted right before the rainy season. Nobody wants to have to start looking for a new house right before the rainy season. Okay, so that's why it could not mean the 1st of Tishrei. The Tanakama, the Brisa, the Tana Didan, Benisan. So, and how about, this is only a Yeshomrim for houses, but the first opinion did not think Nisan was Rosh Hashanah for this contract. And the author of our Mishnah also did not think Nisan was Rosh Hashanah for renting houses. What's their opinion? So they say, Benisan nami kitri. You know what? In Nisan also sometimes you get clouds and sometimes you get rain. So there's no logical reason to think that you're just as willing to get, to end your contract, in Nisan. Nobody wants to be leaving the house in Nisan either, right? What is it? April showers bring May flowers, something. Right now it's pouring. So, it rains sometimes in the spring also. So I don't know what they would say there. So therefore, what would you say? Tishrei? I mean, is Tishrei any better? But I guess they would say there's no absolute rule. You have to look in each locale what the context is and what's assumed based on when you say a year. Now, the other thing you might want to look at is how much money was paid. And that might be an indication of what was meant, right? And this becomes a question. According to the approach that Nisan always defines the end of the year, what if the amount that's paid is completely out of whack? It was Rosh Chodesh Adar and it was a year's worth of rent, right? Would you really say that it stops at Nisan? So Tosfos, look at Tosfos. He says, also Lo Shana, says Tosfos, V'lo Aminan Hadami Modim. And we don't say that we are going to look at the amount that's being paid and we're going to use that to determine. What do you do with all the excess funds? It's crazy. You're not going to pay $10,000 for 1 month. So we'll either say that was a gift, meaning basically, he overpaid and he just wanted to give it as a gift, a signing bonus, I guess, in the opposite. I don't know. Anyway, or no, he just meant it as like, hold on to this money, but he was going to get it back in the end. Obviously, there's a big difference, which is, am I going to get the excess money back? But that becomes also the whole fascinating question of dine mamanis, and do you go after rove, and what type of factors do you use? So, the fact that it's only a yesh omrim is good because it makes more sense that there isn't a very well-defined convention, that you would use that you would look at the more context to try to determine what was meant. Okay, now we are finally done with our Mishnah, with the issues about Rosh Hashanah, about Nisan, right? So we had Melachim, we had kings, we had Regalim, right? And that's it in our Mishnah. We looked at a Breita that had Nisan for a whole other series of things, Iburim, etc., etc. We looked at other things that weren't in our Mishnah, Chadashim and so on. And now we're done with Nisan. And now we move on to the next part of the Mishnah, which is Iyar, okay, which is, right, I'm sorry, not Iyar. Be'echad be'elul, thank you, Rosh Hashanah l'ma'aser behema. And Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon say be'echad b'tishrei. Okay, so this is when you look at all the animals born that year and you take, every 10th one, and that becomes ma'aser, and what year means born that year, and this is the debate of whether you go by Elul or Tishrei. Okay, so let's take a look at the Gemara. Be'echad be'elul Rosh Hashanah l'ma'aser behema. Money. So we know Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon say you go by Eon. But I'm sorry, by Tishrei. I don't know why he was saying Eon. We know they say Tishrei. That's next line in the Mishnah. Who is the stam author of the Mishnah that says that Maser Behema goes by Elul? So the Gemara says Rabbi Meir. It's Rabbi Meir. Titnan, we come to the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir Omer, Echad be'elul, Rosh Hashanah l'maaser behema v'liregalim. Okay, Rosh Hashanah l'maaser behema. Okay, so Rabbi Meir is the one that says the first of Elul is Rosh Hashanah for maaser behema. Good. So that line in the Mishnah of the first of Elul is Rabbi Meir. It says the Gemara, Regalim money. Now, when the Gemara said that Tishrei was Rosh Hashanah for Regalim, we said, what does that mean? We said it meant that you had to do the Regalim in order, starting with Pesach, in order to be over on Baal Ta'acher. Now, who was that author? Remember, we mentioned a Breita that had many different opinions about what you need, about which Regalim and how many and what order for Baal Ta'acher. Who was the one that said it was 3 Regalim starting with Nisan? Rabbi Shimon. So we saw in an earlier Breita that was Rabbi Shimon. Ema Seif. And now let's look at the next line in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Omin, be'echad b'tishrei, the first of Tishrei. So the Gemara makes a very good question, right? The Mishnah says Nisan is Rosh Hashanah l'regalim, which means basically you need Kisidron for Baal Ta'acher, right? Which starting with Pesach, right? That's what Rosh Hashanah l'regalim means, and we know that idea of Baal Ta'acher is Rabbi Shimon. Okay, then we say Elul l'maaser behema, and we know from a Mishnah in Bechorot that who says that? Rabbi Meir. And then it says Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Eliezer Omrim, it is not Elul, but it is Tishrei. Okay, so look at our Mishnah. First it quotes the stam of Rabbi Shimon, then it shifts to the stam of Rabbi Meir, right? So what's the story? And then it goes back to a Rabbi Shimon position. But but how is it adopting a stam position? The first line of Nisan is a position as a Rabbi Shimon position, and the next line of Elul is a Rabbi Meir position. So the Gemara says, okay, Reisha v'Sefer Rabbi Shimon u'Mitziasa Rabbi Meir. Use the beginning and the end is Rabbi Shimon, and the middle is Rabbi Meir. And Rav Yosef says, Rebbe, look, Rebbe is the author. He gets to pick and choose. V'nasi v'lei aliba d'tanoi and he picks, which Tanaim he likes. He picks different positions according to different Tanaim. The Regalim Savrla Rabbi Shimon. The first line of the Mishnah of Nisan and the Regalim go in order for Baal Ta'acher is a Rabbi Shimon position. And the next line of the first of Elul is the Rabbi Meir position, and he likes that Rabbi Meir position. So yeah, it's true that they're different authors, but that's the way Rabbi paskins. So the Gemara says, 1 minute. If that's true, Arba, what do you mean 4 Rosh Hashanah? Chamisha Have, there are 5. Why are there 5? Because it said, remember, this one was Rosh Hashanah Limlachim, right? Ulu Regalim, okay? And then it said Elul, and then what was next? Tishrei is all the things that Tishrei are for, or some of the things mentioned in the Mishnah for Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah L'Shanim, L'Shmitim, etc. Shanim, Shemitim, etc. And then it had Shvat, right, that's for trees, right? etc. Okay, so we say 1, 2, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But now we've got a problem, which you could have asked without this whole Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir thing, which is, since this is Rosh Hashanah Limlachim, this is Nisan 1. Mm-hmm. Regalim is Nisan 15. So really, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so now let's take a look at how we're going to deal with that. So the Gemara says there are 5. Amar Rava says Rava, Arba l'divrei hakol. Everybody agrees to 4. Rabbi Meir Arba dal regalim. Rabbi Meir would have 4 minus the regalim. Rabbi Shimon Arba dal maser behema. Rabbi Shimon would have 4 because he would drop maser behema. What does this mean? It means Rabbi Meir doesn't hold of this idea of regalim, right? This is a Rabbi Shimon position, right? That you start by Pesach and go forward. So according to Rabbi Meir wouldn't hold of this, and he would hold of 4. He would have just 1 Nisan for kings, then Elul, then Tishrei, then Shvat. So he has 4. Rabbi Shimon also has 4. Why? Rabbi Shimon holds 1 Nisan, 15 Nisan, but he doesn't hold of Elul, because he holds Meiser Behema is Tishrei. Mm-hmm. So he has 1 Nisan, 15 Nisan, not Elul, Tishrei, and Shvat. So both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon individually hold 4. Although Rebbe's Psak gets him 5. Because Rebbe now has Paskin 1 Nisan, 15 Nisan, Elul, Tishrei, Shvat. So the individual Tanaim hold the 4. But by him picking and choosing, he's left with 5. So if Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar, Arba Chadashim, Ubehen Kama Rashi Chadashim. There are 4 months. And some of the months have more than 1 Rosh Hashanah, like Nisan is 1 and 15, but it only counts as once. When we say 4, we mean 4 months. All right. So, Meisvei. Now I'll ask you, because now it seems like there's more than 4. Even more. Shishasar b'Nisan Rosh Hashanah le'omer. The 16th of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah le'omer. Now, what does it mean Rosh Hashanah le'omer? It's the day you bring the omer. But no, it also starts the year when you can eat the new grain. Mm-hmm. So this is the new year for the grain that can be eaten. Shisha b'Sivan, the 6th of Sivan, meaning whenever Shavuos falls out. Rosh Hashanah l'shtei halechem is Rosh Hashanah for the 2 loaves of bread that are brought on Shavuot. Now, what does that mean? That's just a korban? No, because what are you allowed to do after you bring the shtei halechem? Do you know?
Bring mincha offerings.
Bring the mincha offerings from the new grain.
Yeah.
So in terms of, it's a year of now eating of the grain, of last year's grain, that starts, your eating of it starts on the 16th of Nisan. The temple's acceptance of it, having it as a sacrifice starts on the 6th of Sivan. So therefore, these are 2 more new years. So we should have now 6 or 7. So the Rav Elis Nishisha, for Rav's idea, who basically counted, middays of the months as separate Rosh Hashanah, we should go from 4 to 6. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Elis Chamisha, and even Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, you should have 5. Why? Because Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak doesn't count middays separately. So the 16th of Nisan wouldn't get counted. Right? Because that's part of the Nisan category of months. But Sivan should still be counted. So how come this idea of Nisan and Sivan, of the Omer and the Shtei Halechem, does not up our numbers to 5 and 6? So the Gemara says like this. Amar Rav Papa, so now we're going to have a series of answers. Amar Rav Papa, Kika Chashiv, Midi Dechayel Me'orsa. Midi Lochai Me'orsa Loka Chashiv. We're only counting things that begin the night before, that begin at the beginning of the day. These things, the Omer and the Shtei Halechem, is brought in the middle of the day, so they don't count. What do you mean? The regalim, you're only able to bring your korbanot in terms of Baal Ta'acher in the daytime. That doesn't start the night before, and those are being counted. So the Gemara says, No. Since your obligation to bring the korbanot started already way earlier, Mechayev, V'koi, you're already obligated. So the regalim is just when the obligation sort of is over, or has been violated. But in a sense, it's not like the whole thing began in the daytime of the regalim. All right. Very Yovlos. How about Yovel? That doesn't begin on the night before. Why? Because presumably by Yovel it's on Yom Kippur to Avilu Shofar B'chol Artzachem, which is understood to be B'Yom Kippurim in the daytime. So the Yovel year doesn't really begin until the daytime of Yom Kippur. That doesn't start the night before, and that's listed in our Mishnah, the Kachashiv, and it's listed in the Mishnah. No, this is the position of Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, the Amar who says, Rosh Hashanah Chayo Yovel, although you blow the shofar on Yom Kippur, it really begins on Rosh Hashanah and the night of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so one answer, why didn't we count 16th of Nisan and the 6th of Sivan? Because we don't count things that start in the middle of the day. This is maybe a simpler answer. The Mishnah is only mentioning things that don't require an action, happen automatically. First of Rosh Hashanah rolls around, these halachas. First of Nisan, these halachas. Midi detali b'maaseh. This is less about the date. This is more about doing an action. Bringing the Omer, bringing the Shtei Halechem. So if there, it's a very different type of a category, right? That makes a lot of sense. If I said that to you, you would tell me, it's not about it being the 16th of Nisan, it's about the fact that you bring the Omer. And that's what he's saying. The Mishnah mentions things that are really about the dates and happen automatically. We're not mentioning things that are dependent on doing an action. So if the Gemara says, Varei regalim, midu tutali b'maisiv v'kachashiv, how about the regalim? That's about an action. That's about bringing korbanot. So the Gemara says, no, it's about not doing it. The Gemara says, Bal ta'acher mimei l'chayim. No, the idea of the regalim is because you didn't do something, the date holds you liable. But it's not that the date has significance because you did something on that date. Okay, and we'll just read one more line. Varei yovlo, how about yovel, that also has a blowing of a shofar. That's about an action. So Bishma b'nosh Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokahi. Now, again, that's the idea that it starts on Rosh Hashanah. Rav Ashi Amar, last answer, Arba Rosh Hashanah Haim, Shehain ba'arba Roshei Chadashim. Okay, there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs that fall on Rosh Chodesh, meaning we're only counting the Rosh Hashanahs that fall on the first of the month. So we're not counting the 16th of Sivan, of Nisan, we're not counting the 6th of Sivan, we're not going to count the Regalim, again, because we're mentioning the Regalim because of the middle, but we're only counting Rosh Hashanah that begin on the first of the month. So that's great. 1, 2, 3, 4. All these begin on the first month, except
Tu B'Shvat.
Shvat, according to Beis Hillel, is Tu B'Shvat. So the Gemara says, Be'echa B'Shvat. So the Gemara says, Be'echa B'Shvat ki Beit Shammai. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? How about the fact that Echa B'Shvat is Beit Shammai? Hachi Kamar. Shlosh, that's what it says. Shlosh l'divriyakol. There are 3 Rosh Hashanah according to everyone that start on the first of a month. Be'echa b'Shvat, machlokas Beit Shammai Beis Hillel. When it comes to the first of Shvat, that's a debate. So the idea that there are 4 is really only a Beit Shammai position. Okay, but anyway, again, trying to figure out how you get only 4 and what you do with these other ways of counting it. Okay, ended exactly on time.